Welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, come and join us in the chat. It is a big interaction day because, look, you, the listeners, you come, you show up live, but some of you also get us later, and you also have questions. You've got thoughts that you want to add to the conversation, so we're bringing it back. By popular demand, the big old bag of mail, a return. We've been neglecting you, big old bag of mail, so we're going to do it this week. We're going to cycle in some mailbag questions next week, though we do have our superlatives on Wednesday, and we're going to continue to do it, especially as the playoff race, the coaching carousel heats up, always brings out good thoughts from the listeners. But before we get to that big old bag of mail with questions on Tennessee, thoughts on the COVID year of 2020 at Oklahoma, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, we begin with a headline from over the weekend as reportedly Texas A&M has suspended 3 freshmen because of what has been reported as a locker room incident. And all 3 of these freshmen are true freshmen, which means that they were part of the record-setting class from this past cycle. Cornerback Denver Harris, wide receiver Chris Marshall, offensive lineman P.J. Williams, all reportedly suspended. The Athletic, TexAgs, among the multiple outlets that are reporting this news. Some of them had seen a little bit of playing time. Almost all of them came in with some amount of pomp and circumstance, high recruiting rankings. And so I think that the biggest takeaway maybe is not what their availability is going to be for Ole Miss, but how this continues to pile on to a season of massive disappointment for a Texas A&M team that, coming off of that incredible recruiting class, has started with a 1-3 record in conference play, with a 3-4 record overall. And when you're looking around for quality wins, it's hard to find them, especially as that Miami game, well, what's that worth now? 3-4 again after you lose to South Carolina, snapping a winning streak against the Gamecocks. Is this an individual, is this an individual story, or do you think this is part of something larger in College Station right now?
I think there are 2 elements to this, right? So Denver Harris, I believe, was one of the kids who got suspended earlier in the year for driving like really fast on Instagram Live to a parking garage, like dangerous, could like hit somebody and kill them type thing. So that might be a continuation of behavior, although I'm guessing you're not driving a car in the locker room. So the locker room incident, probably something different. If these kids hit the portal, though, they will be pretty highly recruited out of the portal.
Chris Marshall was too, by the way. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. They were 2 of the 4 players. I think Evan Stewart was also part of that 4-player group from earlier, the 5-star wide receiver. Now, this is not the first time that this freshman class has been caught with suspensions. You were right about that.
Smoke was the other one, which is a good name for the story. Anyways, go ahead.
And Bowie's had some other stuff too. Like he was a Georgia commit until he wasn't. And I'm not really sure that was his choice back in the day. So there's a lot of freshmen in this best class of all time that I know for a fact other schools are just watching to see if they will transfer out because of cultural problems at Texas A&M. And it's easy to sit here and blame NIL for this. I'm like, oh, they got these kids because of NIL, allegedly, although A&M denies it. But I mean, guys, Lindale White on the Busting with the Boys pod just said that like he got $150K in cash routinely at USC back in the days. This is not really new. I think it's misplaced blame to be like, hey, NIL is causing this. Jimbo Fisher left a cultural mess in Tallahassee when he left, right? That Willie Taggart had to kind of deal with, and Mike Norvell mostly has cleaned up now. It seems like they have some cultural problems there at Texas A&M, and I don't really know what incentive he has other than winning, which is an incentive, to change it, because the guy gets $100 million guaranteed. If he wants to run the same terrible offense for 5 years in a row, he can. It's not like Ross Bjork's going to tell him no, tell him to get an offensive coordinator. He doesn't have to listen to him.
Yeah, I mean, is it like known what it was for, or are we still all just kind of speculating what it was for?
I didn't want to. It is funnier if what is been reported is what it is for. I have not seen none of the sources when we were discussing this story in the newsroom. None of the sources that the our editorial staff felt comfortable citing, wanted to go anything further than locker room incident.
We're not an editorial staff or a podcast, so
I was just teeing it up with the standards and practices of the CBS Sports editorial staff. But if they were smoking weed in the locker room,
anything. But
well, we could say that the locker room incident did not rise to a felony level of incident, right?
I don't know. I was going to say, if you're in South Carolina, it's the wrong state to be trying that.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think it's a good sign when you have, I mean, it's first of all, if that's what the players did, it's their own stupidity for doing it, and it's on them 100%. But I don't think it's a very good sign if you have players on your team who are like, yeah, let's just light up in the locker room. Like that doesn't tell me that there's like a very disciplined kind of situation going on at the team, because it's like, why do you think you could get away with it? Like, there's clearly not enough going on there where they're thinking, well, no, we can't do that. We'll get in trouble. They're probably just like, yeah, who cares? Let's do it. It's not a great sign.
I mean, it is not reflective of a team that appears to be on the same page, 100% committed to the kinds of success that we have seen. Everything that successful head coaches preach about, the messages that they try to deliver, even if these guys weren't planning on playing, no matter what the situation was, it does not indicate that the South Carolina game was being taken seriously, right?
And it kind of indicates that maybe they're not taking their job that seriously about being there. Maybe they're kind of already checking out. They don't care.
If you hire Steve Adazio and DJ Durkin, though, can it be argued that you're taking your job as a head coach all that seriously, as far as like creating a culture? Think about this. Like, that is not a good recipe to create good culture based on what happened at those guys' previous jobs. It's like, I mean, that's kind of foreseeable.
Mm-hmm. It's a mess. Like, maybe if they were winning games, they'd be able to cover this stuff up and it wouldn't be as big of a problem. But when you compound what's going on with what's going on in the field, it's just an absolute mess. And then you toss in the fact that there's already plenty of people who are kind of wanting Jimbo to give up the play calling duties, but there's no real reason to think he's going to do that. He doesn't want to do that. He has no need to do that. It's just,
who's going to tell him, Tom?
Nobody.
Ross Bjork? Like, do you think Ross Bjork told Hugh Freeze what to do?
No.
He's not going to tell Jimbo.
That's the thing, because it's like, it's a situation where with that contract, it's like there's no pressure on him to change anything he doesn't want to change. Like, he's got it in a situation where unless somebody's willing to cut a giant check, and maybe there is, who knows? Texas A&M is Texas A&M. Maybe somebody gets so pissed off about the way the rest of the season goes, they do something very, very stupid. But it's a mess right now. It's not to say that they can't start winning games. It's not to say that they won't win games next year. But right now, it's terrible. It's not good. It's not a good look for anybody involved with that program at the moment.
By the way, Eric, the Oregon fan in the live chat right now, who says, come to Oregon, you're all good here. That's hilarious.
That's happening everywhere, by the way. Yeah.
All right. So to advance the more on the nose, like, here's where we're going with this. So how bad can this get? Remaining schedule for Texas A&M. Ole Miss at home this weekend.
Could
Florida
win.
At home next weekend.
Could win.
At Auburn. UMass at home on the 19th, and then LSU at home on the 26th. 4 of the 5 remaining games that you would consider competitive are all at home. I think that makes it worse. I think if all these losses are in Kyle Field and this team is flirting with bowl eligibility going into the LSU game, that makes this all much, much, much worse. Is Texas A&M a bowl team at the end of the year?
It depends. I mean, if this is a sign of things just kind of snowballing and going out of control for the rest of the season, players checking out and people just kind of, like we see it happen all the time, then they're probably not. But at the same time, like I just said, like those 4 games you just mentioned, the next 4 weeks are all very winnable games. If Texas A&M wins all 4 of them, I'll be surprised, but I won't be like completely, wow, I didn't see that coming, because they're probably going to be favored in all 4 of those games.
I mean, Auburn could be just as checked out.
Yes.
Right? Like, I didn't put this on the rundown, but Landon King announced he was going to enter the transfer portal last night. And there's a lot of speculation on Auburn Twitter now that Harsin is basically doing this like player go thing. Like, I'm not cool with you guys sitting out because you realize I'm going to be fired, so that you preserve your eligibility as opposed to playing in this wasted season. And it seems to have backfired, because you got kids over there like, All right, cool. Yeah, I will just jump in the portal for the rest of the semester, and then Auburn will probably let me back once you get fired, Brian Harsin. But what if Auburn checks out? A&M could beat Auburn. They could beat Ole Miss this weekend. Ole Miss is kind of on a bit of a slide here as far as quality of play. Now, Ole Miss did beat Auburn, and they're favored over A&M, and I'm going to take Ole Miss to win that game. But it's not crazy to think that they could win. I will say, though, there's an injury thing with A&M too this year, to where Jimbo does normally not like to play young players, and he's had to play a lot of them. It hasn't looked very good. PJ Williams might have had to play, right? Marshall may have had to play more down the stretch. Those are guys that they may actually have needed to play because they've got a bunch of offensive linemen out. We'll see how bad their blocking looks. Probably shouldn't have 7 false starts at home, though. I mean, that was an issue at South Carolina.
I think this weekend's game is huge.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
If they lose to Ole Miss, then we could see it snowball pretty quick from here. If they win, maybe they, circle the wagons.
If they run the table the rest of the way and finish 8-4, they're going to end up in the daggum 24th spot of the final college football playoff rankings. An 8-4 A&M team at number 24 in the final CFP rankings, as it was intended.
Mm-hmm.
They'll hang a banner for that.
I will say, we are deservedly so. We are criticizing them, but they've lost 3 in a row, but all 3 of the games were on the road. So like you were saying, with all these games at home, it's not crazy to think they're going to play better at home.
Right. And I'm absolutely being biased by recency, where I think that it's nothing but negative, bad vibes. And that's why I think it would make it worse. Like, if you want to see them get really angry and be very because right now they're dealing with inflation era Kevin Sumlin. Like, the results are Kevin Sumlin, and they are paying double price.
Mm-hmm.
And if that continues and they finish 7-5 or 6-6, and a bunch of these losses are at home, then I don't know about who's cutting the checks or how the power is dispersed between Ross Bjork and the power players around the program. But I don't know how somebody's hand will be forced to do something.
Also, God knows what Lane Kiffin's
by who
if the Rebels win this weekend.
I mean, will be forced is kind of a passive sentence. Like, who do we think is going to do the forcing?
Somebody who can rally together enough money to at least justify, maybe not this offseason, but at least letting it know to Jimbo Fisher that this fully guaranteed contract can be paid off.
I think he'd be like, cool, you guys are weirdos here. I don't care about this collie and this yell stuff y'all do. And I said I'm a boots guy, but I can be a boots guy and go take over at West Virginia. Give me my $100 million. I'll have a fresh start elsewhere. I think A&M is completely at the mercy of Jimbo deciding that he needs to make major changes. It has to be him deciding it. I don't think that any booster pressure can do it. It's like, you're going to threaten me by paying me $100 million?
Mm-hmm. It's
or
very
90 now, 89. I think not. It's because he got paid obviously this year's money already.
Yeah, it's very similar to what we talked about with Iowa. It's very similar situations where there's changes that need to be made, but the person who has to make those decisions really doesn't have the pressure to make them unless they really want to.
All right, let's go ahead and dive into the big old bag of mail. A reminder, listen, we want you to be participating in this show all throughout the rest of the season. And one great way for you to do it is you go and you leave us a 5-star review. And in that review, you put your question. We will throw it in the big old bag of mail and tackle it in a future mailbag episode. This question comes from the big old bag of mail. It comes from Jake. Dear Cover 3 Pod, Tom Fornelli called me a, quote, poor deluded bastard to start the season, and look where we are now. Tennessee is an undefeated top 3 team, and Tottenham is currently 3rd in the English Premier League. My question is, why has Heupel been successful at UT? Remember, Heupel had 3 seasons at UCF, each one worse than the previous one. Nobody was clamoring for him to be a Power 5 head coach. So that's one part of this, and then he follows it up. Is there currently an underrated group of 5 coach that could succeed at a Power 5 school? Are we going to see less splashy hires and more, quote, program fits? Love the pod. Go Vols, Jake.
Well, Jake, you're right. You were a deluded bastard, and I'm sorry for calling you that. But I will also point out that while Tennessee's undefeated, Tottenham has lost 2 straight, and your manager is not committing past January right now. So things aren't looking great there. But for Tennessee, solid.
Why has he been successful? it can't just be like his offense is a trick bag.
I think that's a large part of it. And I don't want to say that as like a way that discounts it, because he runs it extremely well. Yeah. Like those points count, right? If we're going to talk crap about Jimbo Fisher's offense, and we do, because it doesn't create those easy, wide open downfield shots and take advantage of the freebies and the rules of college football, then we need to credit Josh Heupel's offense, which is really Art Briles' offense, for doing so. Like, they're running just straight Briles Baylor stuff. It's not a whole lot different from what, at least from what my eyes tell me, from what Baylor used to run. I think a couple things here. Number one, when that hire was made, I thought that he would not last there all that long, but it was a really smart hire because they had the potential for major sanctions to come, and they would score enough points to keep people in the stands because fans like offense. I think I underestimated a couple things. And obviously they did too on the one of these things, because they didn't start Hendon Hooker. They started Joe Milton, who really can't play, in my opinion. Right. But eventually Milton gets dinged and they have to put in Hooker. Maybe Hooker would have taken the job anyway, because Milton's just not an accurate player. And Hooker turns out to be really, really good. Something that Justin Fuente and Virginia Tech also missed out on him. So maybe there's a chance that guy is a really, really bad practice player relative to his in-game performance. I also thought he was not a very good recruiter at UCF, and I would stand by that. However, with Spire and the NIL stuff, Tennessee's recruiting has gotten much better. And I think that is mostly a credit to their NIL. Now, the staff works hard and whatnot, but if you just said, hey, independent of NIL, is Heupel a great recruiter? I would say no. I also think he's a pretty genuine guy. People in the building seem to believe in him, and there is something to that. But hitting on quarterback, who you didn't even realize was the guy until your starter got hurt, a really fun, innovative offense, massive turnover within your division, and you had a really, really awesome NIL program kick in at the right time would be kind of the four keys there. I think he has a chance to last longer than I initially thought because of that.
Yeah,
I was wrong.
I think Hendon Hooker is a huge part of it because, like you said, they didn't name him the starter originally, but I think Hendon Hooker was a quarterback with a lot of talent who was at Virginia Tech, was in the wrong fit, comes in here, is in a good offense for him, is just actually kind of blossomed into a better quarterback. Like, the talent that he had, he's taking advantage of, and just, it's, again, like I've said, I've watched him play, the accuracy, the decision making, all that stuff. He's mastered the offense, and he's doing a terrific job, and you're seeing that result. But then I also think on the other side of the ball, the defense has taken a step forward. The defense was not great last year. Tim Banks, his defense this year, is doing an excellent job. They can stop the run, and and you're looking around the SEC right now, stopping the run is pretty effective, especially in the East, because there's not a lot of other Tennessees out there right now that you have to worry about being able to tear you apart through the passing game outside of Alabama. And we saw what happened there. It was 52-49 back and forth shootout. So I think Tim Banks deserves a lot of credit for what's happening there. And I think also Josh Heupel just being smart enough to hire former Illinois coaches and get that kind of pedigree into your staff, because Tim Banks was the defensive coordinator at Illinois for a while during the Tim Beckman era, and the recruiting coordinator at Illinois during that era, Alex Galesh, is now the offensive coordinator. So a good quarterback, a good defense, and Illinois pedigree. That's why Josh Heupel's having success in Knoxville.
The other thing I think that I did not properly count for was just how bad the offense was under Jeremy Pruitt relative to its talent level. Like, I knew Jeremy Pruitt was kind of like Cro-Magnon defensive coordinator and a really bad people manager overall, just during his stint as head coach. I'm not saying he has to be forever, but I don't think I accurately figured out how much talent Tennessee had on the offensive side of the ball and how much that talent was being suppressed by the archaic approach that Pruitt was trying to run with his guys offensively. And so if you don't correctly gauge the baseline of talent there, your assessment's going to be wrong. So I think that's another reason I was wrong about that.
Sustainable over time? Is there a
to what level?
Well,
like, can they play as a top 5 team consistently?
Yeah, like does the SEC, if they are dominant, if they win the SEC will react. Like, there will be a response that goes across the SEC East, that goes across the entire SEC. I mean, there will be a defensive response in the way that they are played. There'll be a defensive response in the way that teams are constructed. Like, there's no way that you can run the same plays forever at the very top of college football.
As long as the hash marks don't change.
Yeah.
Like, they take advantage of the geometry pretty well. But let's also realize that Kendall Briles, literally Art's son, runs a very similar thing in Arkansas. And their offense does not look as good as Tennessee's because Jefferson is not a good thrower. I mean, by like elite quarterback standards. He does a lot of things well. He's not super accurate as far as throwing the football. So you do need quarterback to get this right. Now, if Nico is that dude, then yes, it's very sustainable. I mean, you put like a legitimate 5-star type talent at quarterback and he hits and plays like a 5-star, then it's extremely sustainable. They're going to score 50 points a game and probably, average 35 plus in the SEC.
Yeah, I don't see why they can't be what Oklahoma was under Lincoln Riley, because it's like, you look at what Hendon Hooker's doing this year. He's going to be a Heisman finalist. He might win the damn award. That's going to be a great recruiting sell. You've already got Nico waiting in the wings. If he hits, like you just said, Bud, that's huge. And you become a very attractive destination for highly rated quarterbacks. And getting really good quarterbacks is an excellent way to be a good football team.
Yeah.
All right, what about the second part of this? Is there a group of 5 coach who might be a little bit underrated that we should keep our eye on? Not that you would have a Heupel-like or Heupel-level jump, but that might be a candidate to for a Power 5 program that would be looking to make a new hire.
Does Jamie Chadwell count? Or
Yeah, I think so.
Is he under the radar though? I mean,
he's not really under the radar.
I would listen. I think Jamie Chadwell, to a lot of college football fans, is not a name that clicks right away.
That's fair. I mean, if you want to make the obvious comparison here, who's a coach who runs basically the exact same scheme, right? It's Sean Lewis and his OC Souter there at Kent State. I mean, we had him on the show. I think if you're an AD, you're like, man, okay, so like the floor, we're going to score a lot of points. The upside might be doing what Tennessee is doing now, and that's a pretty obvious one to me.
Sean Lewis at Kent State. The Jamie Chadwell, not the same offense, though I would say innovative in the way that it's taken option principles and built them into an explosive offense.
Different offense, but like I said, Jeff Traylor, I think, is probably somebody who doesn't get a ton of national attention, who's doing a very good job at UTSA. I've always been a big Willie Fritz guy. I don't think Willie Fritz is ever really destined for the Power 5 at this point, though, but we see what he's been able to do with Tulane this season. He's got him in the AP top 25. So those are a couple guys that come to mind for me.
All right. Coming up on the other side, the 2020 college football season was unlike anything we had ever seen. Why did we see some teams flash during that season, but not be able to replicate that success? We'll dig into that and more next.
This October.
Hello?
When you bundle Paramount Plus with Showtime, no one will hear you stream.
Don't say that. Holy headless horsewoman!
I'll be right back.
There's something new out there.
Watch it all here.
This neighborhood is haunted.
Stream Paramount Plus with Showtime. Bundle if you dare.
So this next question comes from Bud's burner account. Frank Cross asks, no, I'm just kidding. We've been talking about this topic for like 3 weeks, and all of a sudden a Frank CR 602-01636 comes in with one. I'm like, interesting.
I would not put that many numbers on a burner account.
Now, Frank, you are clearly a Cover 3 fan if you are not Bud, or even if you are a fan of Cover 3. What'd you say?
Do you have a burner?
I do. Yeah, but it's not that. And I don't tweet from it. I just make lists because Twitter limits how many lists you can make on your real one. So I have a couple burners that I make like conference specific lists and I load them into TweetDeck.
Chip, do you have one? I doubt it. You barely get on Twitter on your own name. Yeah, okay.
I do not have a burner account. Do you have a burner account?
I do.
Whose is it? What is it?
I'm not gonna tell you my burner account. That ruins the whole point of a burner account.
Okay.
I yell at Josh Pate on it the whole time. That's all I do.
All right. So Frank allegedly asks, no mention of Marshawn Lynch, who was at the Cal game and having fun reliving his antics. But here's the question. Would love to hear you guys break down how the COVID year was misleading on Texas A&M, Indiana, Colorado, et cetera, relative to how they are now. Thanks. Love the show.
This is something we've kind of casually mentioned in the group chat before, and I think on the show, but just I don't know if we've done an entire like segment or question to it. And it is something that interests me a lot because I feel like we view certain coaches, and we try not to just look at single seasons when we discuss coaches or programs. We look at kind of a multi-year sample It informs how we think of them, where the trends are going, all that sort of stuff. And to me, I looked at it, and there are a couple programs that, if you take out their 2020, I do think we view them in distinctly different lights. And you might say, well, wait, it's not really fair to pull out a season. And you guys might say that. And I don't know that I totally disagree with that, to be honest. But I do think if you were going to pull out a season and exclude it because it doesn't match up with what we see in the season before, the season after, or this year, 2020 would make some sense to do so. Because if you talk to people in the sport, some teams really cared. And a lot of teams were just trying to get through this thing, man, on a week-to-week basis. It was not a normal year at all. And I think some of your results from that year are kind of skewed. So I want to throw out a couple teams here. The first is Northwestern. So if you look at Northwestern, okay, like not a great program. Obviously, Fitzgerald has done a great job there. In 2020, they went 6-2 in the Big Ten. 2019, 2021, 2022, 3-19 in the Big Ten. Is that kind of a dead program walking that had a really, really experienced team come back in 20 and play in a year where it was hard to practice? You didn't have a lot of continuity in practice. You kind of just rolled with the team you had from the prior year. Got a lot of turnover luck. To me, that's a real obvious one that says, you pull out that 2020 where they made the conference title game, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, do you want to go team by team, or do you want to go with the larger picture stuff first?
Yeah, we can go team by team.
I think 2020 was the end of a window for Pat Fitzgerald's program.
They were terrible the year before, though, too.
But in 2018, they were back in 2018, they were in the conference championship game. They won the division outright. They were second in the division in 2017. They finished top 25 in the polls in 2015. For a program like Northwestern, like forget even the 2020 period, from 2015 to 2018, 3 top 25 finishes in a 4-year run is bananas.
Yeah, 36 and 17 in that span.
Yeah, I think that staff changes, and I think that some of the other, like the inability to have some, consistent quarterback play. I mean, there's other factors that go into that too, but ultimately for me, it was more like 2020 was the end of a window of unprecedented success for the Northwestern football program.
I also think Northwestern's dealing with a lot of the same stuff Stanford is in the transfer portal era.
Agreed. All right, Texas A&M. 2020, they went 8-1. They went to the Orange Bowl. They argued they should have gotten in the playoff. I don't think they should have. I think if they did, the result would be similar to what happened to that Notre Dame team. 19, 21, and this year, they're 9-11 in the league. Losing record for your $100 million coach. Is that misleading to you? Do you think we judge A&M differently without the COVID year?
Yes. Because I think that the last, obviously 2021, they go into the year they're talked about as a playoff contender. They aren't. And then they put together a huge recruiting class this year, and they're talked about as a playoff contender, and they aren't. And I think that if in 2020 they weren't so close to getting to the playoff, I think that preseason expectation-wise, everybody would be a little bit more skeptical about what that team can be. So, yes, I definitely think 2020's impacted the Aggies.
It's kind of 2020 is doing a lot of work if you believe in what's going on there. A lot of work.
Yeah, because, last year, they started the season ranked number 6, finished the year unranked. This year, they started the season number 6. They are currently unranked.
Exactly. All right, 19, 20, and 21. Indiana went 6-17 in the league. In 2020, they went 6-1. Do we view Indiana differently without the COVID year?
Yeah, no. Well, you're right about this being the COVID year, but I just want to point out I never viewed Indiana differently.
That's true.
Yeah. Many angry Indiana fans will be quick to point out that I never viewed them differently.
You nailed it with close game luck and yeah.
Points off turnovers, all that kind of stuff.
Also, like Kalen DeBoer, Michael Penix.
Yeah.
They hit right on some stuff at the right time. Like if the 2020 season, DeBoer was the OC for 2020, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because then it was just 1 year at Fresno State, and then he's off to Washington. Okay. I think that if 2020 had not been a pandemic year, I do think it would have been a cycle up season for the Hoosiers, and that their success would have been a spike in sort of the graph of how many wins they have per year. But
I don't think that they went 0-9 last year, right? In Big Ten play, or 0-8 or 0-9. Yeah. I don't think they would have been 0-9, but I don't think they would have been much better than 2-7 or 3-6.
I think it is fair to point out that A&M and Indiana have also had quarterback injury stuff in this span, especially last year. Indiana was rocked at quarterback, and I mean A&M obviously lost Haynes King. Having seen Haynes King play this year, I'm not really sure the level of loss that was, but certainly it was somewhat of a downgrade to Calzada. So maybe that's a fair counter to this. And look, I'm not saying that this is, I don't know if you can prove it statistically, but you do view these programs differently, I think, without the COVID year.
The further that we get from it, the less I think that it like Indiana is, as it is sitting, in its current state in the middle of the 2022 season, is not doing a whole lot of like, yeah, but remember that?
Yeah, but let's frame it this way. And I don't know if I hate doing this, but is Tom Allen still the coach at Indiana, if not for 2020?
Does Indiana fire a coach for going 6-17 in the Big Ten? I mean, like historically, are they better than a 250 or than a 250 win percentage in the league?
I mean,
so I said earlier that Jimbo Fisher is inflation era Kevin Sumlin. Without 2020, he's not even Kevin Sumlin vintage.
Yeah, they're worse.
Mm-hmm.
And more importantly, boring worse, right? Like one of the things we've always said on the show is you can't be bad and boring, and that offense, when you're not winning games, is unwatchable. I don't know. Just something I wanted to kind of, Colorado too kind of fits this, but we should probably move on because it's boring. It was only 4 games and they've already fired their coach.
Mm-hmm. And also, they also had like the whole Mel Tucker leaving at the very last minute kind of, you know what I mean? So
right. Yeah. Yeah.
That was just crazy random chance. It was great while it was going on though.
I mean, there has to, so much of college football and so much of the game of football on the like very basic level, people talk about overcoming adversity. I found myself giving some credit. The teams that cared, the teams that decided that they wanted to, that they wanted to try to put a product on the field and be proud of it. I didn't want to totally write it off, but you're 100% right. If the question is being started as, do we view these programs differently? Then I think the answer is absolutely yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. This next question comes from Mitch. Love the show, guys. Keep up the great work. Which struggling blue blood program with a first-time head coach has a better outlook over the next few years? Who you got? OU with Venables or Notre Dame with Freeman? Both have excellent recruiting classes lined up. Amazing how similar each team finds themselves after unexpected coaching vacancies. Thanks, Mitch in Kansas City.
Notre Dame. It's nothing to do with the coaching staff. It's nothing to do with any of that. It's just Notre Dame gets to continue being an independent. Oklahoma's joining the SEC. Oklahoma's life is about to get a lot more difficult than what they've been used to in the Big 12. And I say that as somebody who thinks the Big 12 is very good this year. But if you look historically, I don't think there's much of an argument of what the tougher conference to win in has been. So I think that Brent Venables and the Sooners moving into the SEC, like, I don't think you're just going to jump into the SEC and win 11, 12 games. Whereas I think Notre Dame could have a bad season this year and quickly rebound to 10 wins again next year. So I got to go with the Irish on this one.
I think my answer was initially going to be agreeing with Tom, but the more I think about this, the more I think you can argue Oklahoma for a couple of reasons. Number one, we both would probably agree that one of the coordinators is going to have to go for each of these teams.
Yes.
Most likely. Like, do we think Ted Roof's going to last at Oklahoma? Do we think Tommy Rees is going to last at Notre Dame? I don't think so. Typically, you get to fire a coordinator before you yourself get fired. And neither of these guys are going to get fired in year 2. Like, that's not going to happen. Notre Dame definitely has an easier schedule going forward, especially next year. Like, they do have to play at Clemson and they host Ohio State and USC, which is not easy. But they're going to be favored, I think, in all other games. Louisville loses Malik Cunningham. NC State loses Devin Leary. And Pitt loses a bunch of those guys along the lines of scrimmage. So I think they have an easier schedule. But Oklahoma's schedule is not that tough either. Arkansas State, SMU, and Tulsa in the non-conference, and next year's one of the years they have Kansas as a road game, which, like, Kansas, prove it to me that you're going to be a good team every single year. The difference to me, though, might be if you have to replace a coordinator, will you have more success doing it on the side of the ball you coach? So Venables may have to replace one on the side of the ball that he actually coaches, defense. Whereas we have to see if Marcus Freeman can go out and hire an offensive guy and allow him to work and make it work. The other difference I might point out, and again, I'm just arguing this for the sake of argument because it's a show. I do think Notre Dame is probably the right answer here, is that Oklahoma has a commit named Jackson Arnold, who is a really good quarterback recruit. And Notre Dame does not have somebody on that level, in my opinion. So quarterback-wise, I'm more confident that Oklahoma is going to have high-level quarterback play than I am the Irish will.
When the struggle started for both these teams, one of the things we mentioned on the show were let's see how these recruiting classes end up closing out, because you can have a high recruiting ranking as the listener asked in the question, but that class can, right before early signing period here in the closing weeks and closing stretch of the season, we could see some decommits. We could see some of these players open up their commitments. What is your level of confidence that both of these classes are going to be able to stay mostly intact heading into the early signing period?
I think most will stay mostly intact. Notre Dame sits at 3 right now. Oklahoma sits at 4. I think it could be reasonable to see them potentially drop out of top 5. I don't think that either will drop out of the top 10. I think they've done a nice job selling the future, and I'm not really sure how many other top kids they will close on down the stretch, maybe one, but ultimately I think they will remain top 10.
Now, one of the great advantages to this show as we go live in the mailbag episodes is that, hey, we'll take a live question from the audience. And so this question from Richard, debate that has been brewing throughout the entire episode. Cover 3, settle the debate. What's the best division in college football? Richard nominates ACC Atlantic, Big Ten East, SEC East, and asks any other divisions I'm sleeping on.
I think it depends on how you're valuing because I think if you're looking at the top 3 teams in each division, I would go with the Big Ten East. If I'm looking at the bottom of the division, I would go with the SEC East, and I don't think the ACC Atlantic wins either.
You would?
Those competitions.
Wait, you would go SEC East for the bottom?
I think, I'm sorry, comparing it to the Big Ten East, I think the SEC East is stronger than the bottom of the Big Ten East, yes. Whereas the bottom, I guess the Atlantic is probably stronger than the Big Ten East too.
At the bottom, I mean, because you have one legitimately bad team.
Yeah, and NC State. I don't know what NC State's going to be the rest of the year, but no, the Atlantic's better than the Big Ten East at the bottom too, for sure.
I still think the SEC West.
You mean the East?
No.
SEC West deserves to be in the conversation. I'm not sure it's the winner, but I definitely think Chip's right. I mean,
I was just
depending
going
on how you think about LSU, right? Because if you're going to argue the SEC West, you probably are thinking LSU is the second best team in that division.
Yeah, I think the East is
think.
Or that the margin, just my SEC, because if you're just going to make it open-ended like that, what's the best division in college football? The fact that we have a tier that includes an LSU, that includes an Ole Miss, that includes a Mississippi State, Texas A&M and Auburn are at the bottom. And
right. And Kentucky just smoked Mississippi State.
So you would say that SEC East over SEC West for this season?
The problem is, and like we love Barton, but Vanderbilt, right, is still in the East. So that's an anchor. Like there's no team in the West that's comparable to Vanderbilt. So Missouri is probably also kind of on that level of the bad SEC West teams, Auburn and A&M. I mean, like we saw Missouri play Auburn to overtime in Auburn, so it's hard for us to argue they're actually much worse.
And fumble out the back of the end zone.
Correct. Yeah, and miss a field goal right before to win the game as well. It kind of depends on how good you think Tennessee is, but we have a data point here. We saw Tennessee go into Baton Rouge and smoke LSU, and I think if you're going to argue that the West is better, you need to have LSU as your number 2 team.
I would put the SEC West ahead of the ACC Atlantic.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that because I think LSU, the way they're playing right now, is probably better than Wake. I would think. But also, like, we have a data point there. I mean, Florida State beat LSU, and they're probably the 4th best team in the division.
Context does matter.
Sure.
And there was 0 winner in that game.
That's true. But I mean, they
that
beat them
game
by
was a tie. That
like,
was
they're up-
all square.
They're up by 2 touchdowns with 5 minutes left, and gave up some really crazy stuff with a fumble on the goal line. Like,
I just as a rule for
You know.
me, I never take the first game of the season too seriously, no matter what happens. Although the
I
results,
tend to agree with that.
but I think that the thing about the SEC West to me is I don't think Alabama's as good as we're used to seeing Alabama be. And I think that really kind of hurts that division because, I mean, Alabama has been the thing carrying the SEC West most of the years as far as being the best division in the league or the country. So when Alabama's kind of dropping off and there's no other elite team, because we've seen the years where Alabama is off, you've got like a generational LSU team. You've got or an Auburn team with Cam Newton. Whereas this year Alabama's off and it's like, all right, now there's a couple other good teams in there, but there's nothing that you're sitting there thinking is great.
So I put this out on Twitter a couple days ago, and I think it's something that we need to talk about. There's a real chance that Georgia is a bigger favorite over Tennessee than Bama is over LSU.
Is that I don't.
No, people are like, you're crazy. No, like Georgia will be like a 4-point favorite over Tennessee, and Bama will be like 17. I'm like, no, guys, right now in some of these look-ahead markets, they're both 2 touchdowns.
Okay.
They're both 14. Like, we see one more data point out of this stuff. There's a real chance that it's like, Bama's not 2 touchdowns going into Tigerland.
I will say if Georgia is a 2-touchdown favorite over Tennessee, I am taking Tennessee.
Yeah.
Well, but it depends on why, because that would also mean that Tennessee probably looked vulnerable this weekend against Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, if we see Kentucky's offensive line, which has been poor all year, run the ball and control the game, lines of scrimmage against Tennessee, then we're going to have some real questions about what Alabama's offensive line actually is, right? Are they actually that good? Should they have been able to run the ball better on the balls and control the game? Because if Kentucky can do it, I know damn sure Georgia can.
I'm not saying it can't happen, but based on what I've seen, Kentucky's offensive line is not going to be pushing around Tennessee's defensive front this weekend.
I agree. Yeah, they've been really uncharacteristically bad.
Yep. Weird. Why is that? Are there any pieces that have changed from
They
Kentucky?
lost some guys. They lost their coach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you would think that coach would have also led to more improvement at Alabama.
Yeah.
But that's a good data point that you need to look at is same run defense going up against offensive lines with the offensive line coach changing from Kentucky to Alabama. We'll keep an eye on it. Again, one of the biggest games this weekend, Tennessee, Kentucky, just a massive entree, a massive appetizer in Tennessee season to the entree that will be Georgia and Tennessee battling for the SEC East. All right, one more before we get out of here. This question comes from Jay. It says, "Hey guys, love the show. I haven't missed an episode in more than a year. Love that dedication."
That's
Important question.
To us.
Yeah.
Danny.
Important question. For the entire season up to this point, Michigan has been ridiculed for its cupcake schedule, and its week-to-week top 5 ranking was questioned because of that. Now that Michigan has beaten Penn State, why isn't a team like Ohio State being questioned to that same degree? They haven't played another ranked team yet and are gaining first-place votes. What, other than the eye test, justifies them being ranked ahead of Michigan, Tennessee, or even Clemson? Thanks.
It's the level of the schedule, right? Yeah. Top 25 is an arbitrary endpoint we draw that used to be based when the sport had about 100 teams on the top 25, like the top quarter of the sport. We're going to rank the top quarter. That's kind of what the poll is. 25 is kind of a round number. People seem to like it. The issue is that Ohio State's schedule to this point is absolutely harder than Notre Dame's schedule, right? They both played Iowa. Michigan did play Penn State, but Michigan also played Indiana, which I continue to kind of think is the worst Power 5 team east of the Mississippi, right? I know get some blowback for that, but they keep losing games and were very lucky in their wins. Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn, who are legitimately 3 of the bottom 7 teams
Worst teams
in the entire sport. Yeah. Look, Ohio State's schedule is tougher. Like Ohio State has Toledo. Toledo would be the second best team that Michigan would have played. Ohio State also has Notre Dame, which again would be the second best team, I believe, that Michigan would have played. So the depth of Ohio State's schedule is certainly better. The most impressive win so far is the Penn State win. So you got to give Michigan credit for that. But
also, if you look at metrics, Wisconsin's better than pretty much everybody Michigan's played outside of Penn State and maybe Maryland, depending on which metrics you want to look at.
I mean, I just think its touchdowns are sweet.
I understand, like you're coming off the high of beating Penn State and you crushed them and you're feeling great about it, but to pretend that the rest of the schedule hasn't been a cakewalk. I mean, Maryland is the second best team you've played. That was also the closest game you played, and it was, Joel Klatt will tell you it was a 15-point game in the fourth quarter, but Joel will forget to mention that 15-point game didn't happen until 3 minutes were left in the fourth quarter. But Ohio State, top to bottom, it's been a much more difficult schedule. Yeah, there's a Rutgers, but like Michigan has played 5 Rutgers.
So also, if you think we don't criticize Ohio State, please refer to the YouTube video, which is about 7 minutes long, where we nitpicked their 40-point win over Iowa by pointing out they have had a recurring issue in the red zone against the better defenses, and literally said, if they play this way against Michigan, they will have a chance to lose to Michigan because you're going to have to score some touchdowns. You cannot keep stalling out in the red zone. So I think we're pretty far away from being a anti-Michigan, pro-Ohio State podcast.
Yeah, for somebody who doesn't criticize Ohio State, I sure get yelled at by a lot of Ohio State fans.
Oh, my God, yeah. Also, if we go back to the win totals, I think we had nobody take Ohio State over and several people take Michigan over.
I think it was a lock win. It was a lock.
We like this team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, my preseason CFP projection was both Ohio State and Michigan being in. I said they'd both be undefeated when they played each other at the end of the year. I clearly hate both teams.
Are they going to thump Sparty?
I think so. I don't see Sparty getting any stops. But
I'm going to go the other way on this. I think Sparty might get a couple stops, just won't score.
Yeah.
Sparty seems to be getting a couple guys back on defense here. Like, it's possible that they make McCarthy throw and he misses some passes.
Early down success, good against the run, force McCarthy into 3rd and long, obvious passing situations, which Michigan State's obviously not been great at, but at least you have a strength in what you can do. I mean, 22 is bananas.
And rivalry game's rivalry game. I mean, and this is this is a rivalry game. Anytime the two sides are talking about how much it's not a rivalry, it means it's a rivalry.
Also, on the Mel Tucker thing, it's not really likely, guys, that somebody goes from being a top 5 coach in the sport to like a bottom 5 coach in the Power 5 year to year without some major like personal life stuff. So I tend to not believe that. I think it's more like last year, their record was much better than their actual team was, but they were still a good quality football team. They had a couple special players like Kenneth Walker. This year, they've lost a ton of important contributors to injury earlier in the season on defense. They're getting a couple of them back. They're not. If you judge these programs simply on win-loss, it's all over the board. You need to look at the internal metrics a little bit more, and who they actually have on the field matters. I think he's probably still a good coach.
Anybody going to lock that up tomorrow?
Why would I spoil it?
Find out Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern time when we get back together for our Week 9 locks. I told y'all it's trap week. You got 8 ranked teams on the road against unranked teams. Odds makers have 6 of those 8 games as single-digit spreads. Somebody's going to get trapped. Sneaky, sneaky, sneaky. We will let you know where we think that the upsets might be. We will let you know which favorites are going to roll. All of it in our Week 9 locks episode coming up on Thursday. Come hang out with us 11 a.m. Eastern time, youtube.com/cover3. And you can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fornelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.